All right, everybody. So, welcome to another tutorial. We're going to build our very first game in Godot. Okay. And this is very simple, but we're going to cover basically four main topics. We're going to cover how to create nodes. Okay. So, we're going to look at the node structure in Godot. We're going to look at some basic animation. So, how to add animation to a scene. We're going to look at some scripts. And then finally, we're going to look at signals. So there's four parts to this video. Okay, you can skip along if you already know something or if you're just coming for a simple fix. These examples or these concepts should cover everything. All right, so make sure you've saved if you haven't. So make sure you save your game. This is Bad Game version 6. And what I'm going to do is the first thing I'm going to do, actually, let me cut on so I'm just going to bring this over here so that, actually, let me move it up here. So I'll move it up to the top so you can just kind of have an idea of the keystrokes and what's happening on the screen. Okay, so just making sure. All right, so now, like I said, we are building our first game. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to decide what kind of game it is, right? Is it a 2D game, 3D game? So for this tutorial, let's do a 2D game. So the first thing we want to do is select 2D, okay? And we want to create a root node for a 2D scene. So let's go ahead and select node 2D. All right, and the very first thing we want to do is rename this. So we're going to call this Bad Game. Okay. Now, the first thing we need to do is build our boundary. Okay. And let's save this so that we have our scene saved. So, and you'll notice that once we save our scene, you'll see it here in the file system. Okay. So the bad game scene is saved. And what we want to do is create our boundary. So how do we do that? Well, instead of creating a bunch of nodes, what we can do is actually create a few nodes that are basically references for everything we need in our game. So the first thing we need to do is create a boundary, right? So we're going to create a static body 2D. Now, static body 2D is a type of node that does not, that external forces cannot be applied. So think of a wall or a mountain or something like that. Now, with every node that we add, of course, what we have to do is start to give it some structure, some shape. So let's go ahead and add in some collision shapes. And so the way to do shapes, and we can do some very basic shapes in Godot that are already built in, is we're going to add a collision shape 2D. And what you're going to see is an error every time you do that, because what you have to do is assign a shape to each collision shape 2D. So we're just going to do a rectangle shape. All right. And if you look at where we are, I'm going to pull up the transform while I do this. So you can see the X position and Y position is 0, 0. That's like where the node is, our static body 2D node, which actually I'm going to go ahead and rename boundary. Okay. And I'm just going to add SB2D just so we can remember that it's a static body. All right, so now the next thing I want to do is transform this collision shape to make my left wall. So as you can see, I'm going to stop here. So it kind of has what they call like a 0, 0 shape. And as I change my Y, okay, you can see that the shape is being transformed. And you can see that generally about the size of this canvas is, or the Y position is now 325. So what I want you to notice is what's actually happening is the middle of the collision shape. So this part right here is what is the kind of like the anchor point of the collision shape. So that's what's the reading on the transform. So we know that our canvas, all Godot canvases right now, their default size is 1152 wide, right, by 648 long. So if we're looking at how could we make this collision shape so that the middle point is halfway in the canvas and get this right on, we would just divide 648 by 2, which gives us 324. And if we do 324, we'll just get an accurate placement of our collision shape. Okay, so we can just use math to kind of quickly make some of our boundaries. Now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. All right, let's call this left. Okay, and then I'm going to duplicate this. And now, again, let me pull up the transform. So I could either drag, and if you hold shift, little shortcut, would lock the opposite axis, right? So it's going to think about which axis I'm going in and say, okay, he's moving horizontally, so he doesn't want the object to move vertically. And I can shift. Now you can see that the X position is now changing. So we've moved the X and the Y based on where the middle point is, right? Now, again, we know that the canvas is 1152. So if we just wanted this to be accurate, okay, it's saying that this middle point is now at 1152 and 324. Okay. And we can go ahead and call that right. Now, the next thing we need to do is add a bottom boundary. Okay. Now, again, we could use some math and say, okay, so if we put this at 648, which is halfway between 1152, 576. 648 is the width. 576, which is halfway between 0 and 1152. And then we just wanted to, again, we want our Y, right? We want this to be a bottom. So we want the Y position to actually be 648. Okay. And then we just need to reshape or resize our collision shape. So again, we're anchoring our collision shapes to the points, as you can see, to the points, which kind of makes sense. And then we're just changing our boundaries based on that. And it all depends on how you set your anchor points, but I've always found that this is kind of an easy and quick way to build some quick boundaries using this method. Now, one thing I want to show you is that if you go up here to the Manage Object Properties, you're going to see this little Properties button, and go ahead and click that. And at the bottom, you should see a button that says Make Sub-Resources Unique. And by clicking that, you're going to see a dialog box that says Shape, and do you want to confirm? You're going to say yes. Now, what that's going to do is allow us, so if I go back to the left and I want to change the size, notice what happens to the right. Because Godot is looking at these as exact copies. So what we want to do is make these unique copies. And then if I hold Option while I drag, I can now resize this appropriately. Okay. So Option is just dragging in a symmetrical way. So whatever I do to one side is going to do to the other. So now I can set my boundary. Okay, and we're going to rename this bottom. Okay, now, what's nice about this is because these are all noded to static bodies, the next thing that we're going to do is just add in the rest of the boundaries. we can just add in our boundaries and keep telling our game to recognize this all as one big static body. Okay, so if we just hit a shortcut to pull up our node box, and then we are going to add in another collision shape. Okay, now it's going to say that it has no shape, but the first thing we're going to do is assign a shape, and then we're going to place our collision shape on our canvas. And this is going to be our first obstacle. So we can kind of place it somewhere to leave enough room for our player on the left, and he's going to jump over. So this is our first obstacle. And we're just going to call that block 1. Okay. Now, we can either duplicate or we can just add another collision shape. Dealer's choice. It's all about how fast you like to move or work. Now, if you notice, this was actually noded to block 1. So if you ever do that and you need to change it, you can just click and drag, and drop it back into the boundary box, to the hierarchy. Okay, so we're going to call this platform. And then we have one more at the end. And what I'll do is I'll duplicate, and then I'm going to move it up top. Okay, and I'm going to call this landing. And we're going to make the sub-resources unique again. And then hold Option, drag to move it in a little bit more. Okay, and then reposition. Okay, so now we have our collision shape. So we're going to go up to our debug menu at the top. So here is the debug menu. It's the third drop down. And hit visible collision shapes. And now if we save and run our game, and you can hit Command R or Control R if you're on a PC. If we run our game, you can see our collision shape. So we can kind of see a general outline of what we want to happen. Okay. Now let's go ahead and just build in some graphics. So we're going to do a color rect here, and so that we can still see our collision shapes, we're going to just move it up to the top. All right, and I'm going to do this like that, and I'll hold Shift. Oops. And we'll slide this down right to where the bottom of the box is. Okay, and we're going to make that green. That's going to be our ground. And then we're going to add one more color rect and drop it in. And let's resize again. Okay, and we can make this blue, sky blue. Okay, and then we're going to go back and we're just going to rename the color rect ground. And then rename this sky. Okay, so now if you look at our boundary and we run our game, we have, you still can see our collision shapes, but you can see we have a ground, we have a sky. Perfect. All right, so we're going to do a sun, but we're going to come back to the script. But what I want you to do is just go ahead and add a node 2D, because we're going to use our draw function for the sun. So let's just leave that here, but we're going to rename it Sun 2D so we know what it is. And we can slide it right underneath the sky. Okay. So now that we have our basic collision shapes built in, okay, what we want to do is add in the graphical representations of these collision shapes. So we're just going to add in a few more color X, but what we're going to do is actually node them to the collision shapes. So we're going to select block 1, okay, and then we're going to add a color rect. Now, as you can see, the color rect is anchored from the top left, and we don't want that. What we want to do is actually change the anchor point to center. Now it's in the middle of the collision shape, and if we hold Option on our collision shape and then drag, then we can get a pretty good idea of how to shape it, okay? And we can do the same thing with the platform. So we're just going to add another color rect. And feel free to change the colors if you want. I'm just going to stick with the white because we're actually going to code some colors for these. So again, I can just Option, drag. Okay. And leave a little bit of that collision shape so we can see it. All right. And one more thing is we're going to add a color rect to our landing. Okay, again, we're just going to... Now, okay, we could have duplicated these and just... but I just wanted you to see... Excuse me. Just wanted you to see sort of how all of this works, being that this is a beginner tutorial. Okay, so now we have 3 landings, okay? So what I want you to do, now that you have these, is we're just going to rename this one block 1 CR. Okay, so the block 1 color rect, let's rename. All right, and then the landing color rect, let's just call that landing CR. Okay, and then we're going to add a couple more things. So with this block 1, now we need an area that we can use to send signals to different things. So the way to do that is we're going to go here and go to area 2D. All right, again, needs a shape. So we're just going to add a collision shape, create, and create a rectangle. Okay, now if you shift and highlight both of these, we can now just reposition the area 2D and collision shape. And I want to position it right above our block 1 color rect, okay, or block 1 object. And then we can just select the collision shape, and holding Option again, we can move it, place it right above. Okay, now we're just going to call this block 1 area 2D. And then we're going to go to the landing. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to create an area 2D. Okay, and then we need to create a collision shape with that. Make a rectangle, and again we can just position this above and then resize our collision shape right above the landing platform. Okay, so we have our boundary made with each block. So this is block 1 with its area. We have our platform, We have a landing with our landing color rect and area. Okay, we have our ground, we have our sky, we have our sun node, which we're still gonna draw in a second. Okay, so that's our entire boundary. Now the next thing we need to make or add is a player. So the way we're gonna do that is we're going to bring up our node box and hit character. So this time we want a character body 2D. So this is a type of node that has some controls and gravity and or physics, I should say, has some physics options. And again, you're going to get an error because we need to assign a collision shape. So go ahead and assign a collision shape. For this one, we'll still do a rectangle. Okay, we're going to highlight both of these and place our collision shape onto our canvas. Okay. And then let's resize that collision shape a little bit. We get an idea. Okay, and again, if you just hold shift option and shift while dragging, you can move it symmetrically. Okay, so we have a nice size collision shape, and the other thing we need to add to that is a sprite 2D so that we can use Godot's built-in icon to test this game. And so all you need to do is then drop your icon into the texture, and we can just resize this icon a bit so we're fitting into. Okay, and you can make your little adjustments as you see fit. So I'm just going to adjust this a little bit more so we have it right in our collision shape. Okay, so we have a character body 2D. Okay, let's rename that player 1. Make sure I spell that right. Okay, so we have a boundary which contains our background. It has all of our objects. It has our area 2Ds, which we're going to use. And we have a player 1. Okay, now we're going to run the game. Nothing's going to happen because we don't have any script, but that's okay because we can see all of the game that we needed to build so far. So we're doing good. Okay, so let me just make a couple other adjustments. I just want to make sure that this platform is okay. The collision shape, and then I'm going to do the same thing here with the landing collision shape. Just lower that a little bit. Okay, so that is part 1. You've added all of your nodes. We have all of the nodes that we need. Okay. The final thing that we need to do is add our UI. Okay, so we're going to add what's called a control node, and this is just really so we can keep these all in a container, so to speak. I'm just going to resize this a bit. Okay, and then we can just move it over slightly. Oops. Let me the control node again. Let me resize and then just center. Okay, so now what we need to do is add in a few labels or UI elements. So we're going to add in a label. Okay, and then we just duplicate that once. And then we're going to add in a timer. Okay, and now as you can see, it was noded to the label. Well, we can just reparent. And now we're just going to change the anchor preset of the label to middle. We're going to change this anchor preset to top or middle, but towards the top. And the timer's fine. For the timer, let's just go ahead and set that wait time to 10 seconds and 1 shot to on. Okay. Now, for this first label, what we want to do is let's resize this a bit. So from the center. Okay. And we're going to call this label You Win. And we're going to write that in our text box. So a couple exclamation points. And we're going to call it center for horizontal alignment, center for right alignment. Then let's go to theme overrides. And if you go to colors, we're going to make this green. And we're going to make our font size, we're going to override that. And let's go ahead and make that 80 pixels. Okay, so we have a nice giant You Win. Okay, so now an easy way to do this is we also want to create a You Lose label. So we're going to duplicate it so we don't have to do all that work again. Now all we have to do is change 2 things. You lose. And if we go over to our theme overrides, we're just going to change the color to red. Okay, so now we have, and you could turn them off if you don't want to look at them, but let's leave them in. So we have a You Lose and a You Win. Let's rename the You Win, You Lose in our labels. And then we have one more, which is our timer display. So this is going to display the number of seconds. And we can just use a placeholder for this. So we'll just leave timer there. And center, theme overrides, color, let's make it black. And font size 40. Okay, so we have a nice big timer. We have you lose. We have our game timer set up. We have our collision shape. Okay, one more thing. The final thing we have to do is just add an animation player. And this will move our platform. So we're going to go here, animation, player, and hit create. Okay. Now we have officially got all of our nodes in. So we have our scene node, we have our boundary node, okay? Then we have the ground, the sky, all right, the sun, still have it, don't worry about it, still gonna do the code on that. We have the left boundary, right boundary, we have our bottom boundary, okay? We've got block 1, let's open that. In block 1, we have our color rect, okay? We have our area, which also has a collision shape. Then we have a platform, which has a color rect and an animation player. Okay. And then we have a landing, which has our landing color rect. And then we're going to just rename this last area to win area 2D. Okay. Which has a collision shape. Then we have our player, which is a collision shape and a sprite. And then we have our control, which is all of our user interface, or our timer, and whether or not you win or lose. Okay, so for part 2, now we're going to look at our animation. So with our animation player selected, you should now see this animation panel. Okay, and what we want to do is, with that highlighted, let's go up to animation tools and select that, and we want a new animation tool, and we're going to name this platform _ move. Okay, so that's going to create a new animation. And as soon as we do that, you can see that the keyframes have been added to different properties in Godot. We can keyframe different things. So what we'd like to do is actually move our platform. So we're going to select our platform. And what's nice about this is everything that's noded to this will be impacted by this. So we're going to move our platform. We're going to go down to the length of the loop and change that. That's in the top right of this animation panel. And we're going to change that to 4 seconds, hit enter. And you can see that the amount of time selected has now been highlighted on the playhead. Okay. And then we are going to simply grab our transform. So we see that there's a transform of 591 pixels. And all we're going to do is just keyframe that. So we're going to click, keyframe, and it's going to say create new track. And once that box comes up, hit create, and now we've created a animation track for the position. Okay. Now, what we'd like to do is have this animate moving back and forth in a loop. So what we need to do is move the playhead 2 seconds. Okay. And we're going to just change this from 591, okay, to let's say 800. Okay. And then select the playhead or the keyframe again. So we're keyframe again, and you'll see it come up on the position track. And then we're going to go to 4 seconds again. And let's actually go back to 0. So 0 is at 591. And then we're just going to write 591 again. Hit enter to move it back, and then keyframe. We're going to turn the loop, animation looping button on. Okay. And if we just want to play this and see it in our editor, okay, now you can see that we have a platform moving. Now, if you want to stop, okay, you can pause it here. You can hit S to return the animation back to 0, and then you can just hit D to run it, okay? And then again, S will stop it, and then S will return. So just a couple quick shortcuts. Now, one other thing, you can hit the autoplay, so that'll play on load. So if I hit autoplay, all right, and then I run the game, all right, you'll see that the animation is playing when we start. Okay, so now we've kind of built all of our game out, but we can't do anything, right? So in order to do that, what we need to do is add a bunch of scripts to our game. All right. The way to do that is very simple. We're going to select the nodes that we need to add scripts to, and then begin to add in our different parts of code. All right. So if you're looking at your hierarchy or your node structure, the first thing you want to do is we're going to add a script to the bad game, to the actual game itself. Okay. And once you do that, you can just go back to the 2D, or you can keep it on the script page. Doesn't matter. Whichever you feel comfortable with. Okay, so we're going to add one to the bad game. Then the next one we want to add is a script to the block 1 color rect. Okay, so we're going to attach a script. And as you can see, the reason I named these is because then these scripts will automatically be named, and it's very easy to reference. So this is why I named all the objects before moving on to the scripting. Okay, so we're going to add block 1 color rect there. Okay, and then we're going to go to our landing color rect. Do the same thing. I want to attach a script. Now you can go up here to attach, or you can right click and hit attach script. Okay. I'm going to go to player 1 and attach a script. Oh, let me go back. So we're going to go to platform, animation player. We need a script. Okay, player 1, need the script. Now notate that player 1, because it's a character body 2D, inherits this, and you can use this template, which will give it some basic movement that we can change and manipulate. Okay, so we're going to add that. And then the final thing is our sun. Because we're going to use our draw function, we want to go ahead and attach a script to that. Okay, so you should have 6 total scripts. And then if you look down here in your file system, each script has been created. And then also up here in your script editor, you can see all the different scripts. Okay. Okay, so now a couple things. So let's go to our baggame.gd. So this is our scene script. So we need to kind of fix some things in our script so that this all works. So the first thing we need to do is we need to attach some variables for our label and our timer, right? So let's create a variable for the label, and we're just going to assign it as a label so it knows to recognize the label. Then the next thing is let's create a variable for time, and that's going to be referenced by timer. Okay. Now, in our ready function, there's a few things that we want to happen as soon as the game starts, right? So first thing is we want the label to reference our timer label. So there's a couple ways we can do this. We can drag in the timer display, right? Or we could write it. So either way, let's just drag it in for now. So you can drag it in and you can see now that this label is referencing the timer display. Okay. Then what we want to do is we want the time to reference the timer that we created. Okay. And then we want the time to start as soon as we run our game. Okay. Then we have those labels that we could see in the beginning. So the you win, right? And the you lose. And so what we want for both of these is we don't want them to be visible when we start. So let's set that equal to false. And the same thing for you lose. Okay. Now, a couple of things. We need to update this label every frame. So we want that to update. And update the text inside. Now, you're going to see an error saying that this is not found in the base, which means that we need to create a function that will do this. So we're just going to create a function called update label text. And inside of this function, what we're going to do is say label.text. So the property label.text equals a string. We're going to use this little function ceil, which means that we're going to round, and time.time left. Okay, so now if we save our script and run our game, okay, we should have time running, a nice timer that we can see. And we still have an auto play on, so we can see our animation. And as you can see, we have player control. Great. So we have our timer set up. The next thing we need to do is add code to our animation player. So what we'd like to do is let's set a variable so that we can move this based on code rather than the auto start. So what we're doing is we're going to call this variable at the start, and we're going to say that this variable equals the animation player, or is assigned to the animation player. Okay. Now let's go to our player script. Now let's give it, as you could see before, we couldn't do much with the jump velocity. So we're going to change the jump velocity. We're going to increase it. Okay. So now we can jump. Now we got a little bit of jump. Okay. We can make our, we can get to our platform. Great. The other thing we want to do is add a variable that will allow us to stop player movement when the game either ends, if you win or you lose or time runs out. So what we're going to say is variable can move, and we're going to set it equal to true. Now, the other thing we need to do is now add that to the conditional that has to do with direction. So if you look here, we have variable direction, right? And that's getting the input from left and right, but we're going to say if direction and can move. Okay, then do this. Okay. Now, the last bit of code that we're going to do is for our sun. And what we're going to do, let's delete all of this in the script. And we're going to use our draw function. So if you hit function underscore draw, okay, it'll autocomplete. And we're going to now add in a draw function. So we go draw, and you see these come up. Let's draw a circle. And now it's going to say that it needs arguments. So the first argument is vector2, okay, which is the position. Okay, so we actually, if I do it like this, vector2 and then position. And let's go 0, 0. So that's at the origin. And then we need to give it a radius of 100. And as you can see, the arguments that it needs to complete are inside. So radius of 100. Color, let's do color dot goldenrod. Golden. And then if you want a filled circle, we need to set this equal to true. Okay? So let's save that. And if we run, we have a sun. Great. Now, let's say we want to use variables that we create and have them in the inspector so we can move our sun around, or we don't have to keep running to do that. So the way we can do that is we can just type @export, which will create an export variable. Okay, and we're going to assign it circle x. Okay, and let's assign it to 0, so same origin, and then export variable circle y. And assign that to 0 again. Now, the only other difference here is we need to call the variables instead of numbers. So I'm going to circle y. Okay. If you select your Sun 2D, you can see that we have circle X, circle Y. So If I want to change the position of circle X, I can just hit 200, hit enter, save. And now my sun has moved over a little bit more. Okay, so that's the way you can draw using or create backgrounds or shapes using the draw function. Okay, so that is all of the script that we need to prepare for the final thing, which is signals. All right, so now let's bring up our game real quick. I'm going to run the game. So now if you look at this game, there's a few things that we want to happen. When our player lands on our box, we want the box to change color and we want the platform to move. So we need 2 signals from this area to trigger 2 different events. Okay. Then when our player reaches our landing area, okay, we want the landing area to change color. We want you win to appear. Okay. We want the platform to stop moving and we want the time display to go away. Now, if the timer runs out, okay, so our third kind of set of signals, we want the platform to stop moving. Oh, and we also want our player to stop moving. And we want you lose to display. Okay, so all in all, we have 9 signals that we need to create, give or take. But we'll go through each one. All right, so let's go back to our 2D. And let's select our first signal. So block 1 area, to show you how simple this is in Godot. So we're going to go block 1 area. Then we're going to go to the right of inspector and hit node. Okay. And we want body entered. Okay, that's the node that we want to select. So we're going to look at body entered and we're going to hit connect. Then once we go, so it's going to say on block 1 area 2D body entered. And we want to connect that to the block 1 color rect. Okay, so now it's going to send in this code. We can delete all of the ready in process. We don't need that. And what we can type for our block 1 color rect code is if body is character. Okay, so we're just letting it know that look for a character body 2D. Okay, and we have to have a colon after that. Then change the color, so self.color. So we're looking at whatever the color is, we make it the color, assign it to this color. Okay. And let's save, and let's just quickly run that just to show you the first signal and how quickly we made it. So we land, block turns black. Okay, very easy. So that's our first signal. Now let's go back. Now we need the second one. So let's go to our animation player and turn off this autoplay. So now if we quickly run our game, platform's not moving. And we need the platform to move when we hit the box. So what we're going to do here is go to our block 1 area 2D again. Okay. And we're going to hit connect. And we're going to connect this time to our animation player. Now, on our animation player, what we want to happen is if character, body is character, body 2D, okay, move underscore. So you can see this move platform. Okay, and then we're going to, the property is we want to play it, and it's going to ask what we want to play, and we want it to play that animation. Okay. We can get rid of this. All right, and let's save and run again. So as you can see, player lands on the block. Okay. Now, that's the first one. Now let's look at our win area. So we're going to go over here to the win area 2D. I'm going to pull up the 2D, so that's over here. And then we need this win area to trigger a few things. The first thing is, again, we want to change the color. So we're going to go signal on body entered and connect that to the landing color rec. Okay. And again, we want to say if body is character body 2D. So we're changing the color property, and let's make it green. Oops, not gray, green. Okay, and as you can see, it's populated. We can delete all of this. Okay, we don't need to pass. I just like to keep it clean. And let's run our game. Almost there. So block, platform, changes to green. Okay. Now, let's look at how to stop the moving platform. Okay. So we're going to go body entered again from our win area, and we're going to connect it to the animation player. Okay. And then we want if body is character 2D. And we want to stop it. Okay. So again, if we run the game, we hop, land, land. Okay. And I just want to make a slight adjustment to this collision sheet. Okay. So let's run this one more time. So I just wanted to get you to see this. So we got black, which triggers the platform. And then we get up to the top. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is add our U win signal. Okay, so there's a couple things that we need to add. So we're going to go from our win area to our game code, so the bad game code. Okay, so if we look inside here, we can see that there's some what we want to happen, right, on win area. So the first thing we want to happen is time to stop. So we're going to stop the time when you get to the win area. Then the next thing is we have these labels. So you have a control, you have a U win label. So we're going to just change that to equals true. Okay. Now let's also test the console out to make sure that we just running, or say we couldn't see it graphically. So we want it to print you win in the console. And then the other thing we want is we want to turn the label off. So we're just going to say label.visible. And this is the timer. We're just going to turn the timer off when we reach our win. So let's see what happens. So we over here, that starts our platform. Timer's off, and it says you win. Okay, and then if you look in, our console, you can see that it says you win. Okay. here. Okay. And you win. Okay, so almost done. The last few things we need to do. So let's go to our win area and we're going to do one more connection or signal to our player. Okay, and all we're going to do is say if body is character body 2D can move equals false. Okay, so we're just turning the movement off for our player. Okay, so if we make it up to the top now, that starts our platform. And I can't move anymore. Like I made it. Okay. Now, let's say we wanted to add a few things that had to do with our timer, right? So our timer can send some signals too. So the first thing we're going to do is connect our timer, and we're going to use the timeout function. So when the timer stops, we're going to connect that to our platform or our animation player. So we're going to go to our animation player, connect, and just on timer timeout, we're going to say move platform dot stop. Okay. And let me take that in out. And then we are also going to connect our timer to the scene. Okay. And so on timer timeout, we want this to display the you lose. We also want it to turn our label off. We want it to print you lose. Okay, we'll save that. So if we run, and we're just gonna let it run. Uh-oh. So something's going on. Let me see here. Oh, I misspelled visible. Okay, let's do that again. It's good to get an error every once in a while. So let's run that one more time. It's always good to double check. Okay, perfect. Now, the last thing we want to do is connect our timer, and we want to stop player movement on timer timeout too. So we're going to go to our player, connect, and just say can move equals false. Okay. Now if you look, we can bounce around. It turns black, and then we make it up here. Okay. And if we ran it again, it turns black, starts the platform. Maybe we don't make it up. Oh no. Help. And again, platform stops. You can always disable the jump if you want. You can create a variable to do that. But this is a very basic game. So again, you've learned the draw function. You've learned how to use. Oh, let me show also one more time. Let's run this. Let's turn off our collision shape so we can see it clean. Okay. So now you see it. Okay. Oh, it doesn't work. Great. Okay. And let's just win one time for good measure. So we hit our block. It starts our platform. We get to our platform. We make our jump. All right, so that is our first tutorial. This is how you made your really bad game. You were able to use the draw function. You were able to use animation. We've got a little bit of character movement and physics involved, okay? And we've got a bunch of signals and scripts. So thanks for stopping by. Hopefully this helps you navigate Godot a little bit better. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share the video, and yeah.